Welcome to D, your go-to podcast for candid conversations. Dive deep with us into the heart of life's challenges, business hurdles, and the journey to better ourselves. Join us in exploring the art of living intentionally, finding balance, and enhancing not just your life, but your business and leadership skills. It's time to grow, to inspire, and to lead, and D. Conversations that transform. This is D, and I'm Dave Evans.
And I'm Debbie Halls-Evans.
Hi Debbie, we're recording another chapter, aren't we, today, where you're going to interview me some more and share your insights and opinions and thoughts on the things that you're asking me about.
Wow, that's an intro. Yes, I am. And interestingly, this chapter is all about meaningful and meaningless.
Do you find meaningless a difficult word to say?
No.
All right. So I'd ask it.
Okay. Why would you ask that question?
Well, I think the phonetic of the actual word meaningless. It's like when you're playing games on your phone, right? Sometimes you can be playing Scrabble together, or actually not Scrabble anymore. When we do our crosswords late at night, right? And you type in some words like sacrifice, and I see it as a short word, but actually, in fact, it isn't. And it's the letter shapes that make the word look longer. Well, it's meaningless. I remember when I was writing the book, typing it was a nightmare because it was just so long to type in. Anyway, meaningless is pointless, Debbie. Let's just stick to meaning. That's the point.
All right. Well, no, that's not what we debate in the book anyway. So there's a couple of things I would like to go. We've also got a program that we run with Meaning. And it's all built around an acronym that you created, but it's a really great program. It's probably one of our shortest programs, but it's a really, really good one. So if anybody interested, I will put it in the link.
And what's the program called, Debbie?
Meaning.
Thank you.
Right. So as per usual, there is anything you ask yourself as we're going through the podcast, and the chapter review is what can you apply, what can you change? And we're talking about behaviours there. And what can you teach or transform with others or yourself? So, meaning and meaningless, as with everything in the book, there is a paradox around the question that we ask. Meaning, question, meaningless, question. And one of the things that I read in the very beginning, which I really loved, it said, meaning and meaningful are a powerful currency. Mm-hmm. Defining both allows us to assess value. Leaders can work in pointless businesses, not just for days, but for weeks, months, and even years. And this leads to leadership expiration.
Yep.
Also, lots of leadership behaviours.
Yep.
So my first question is, knowing our meaning, can a meaning ever be meaningless?
That's a good question. Can a meaning ever be meaningless? The actual meaning itself or the effect of the meaning?
No, it could be both then.
Well, the effect of the meaning, for me once on a bike ride, had no benefit at all. I remember being stuck on the slopes of On2. For anyone listening, cycling is a favourite storytelling of mine. But for Debbie, I'm not going to go into the detail of that ride, and I do reference it in the book at some points too, right? I remember sitting on a marker on 11 kilometers going up that very high mountain in France, thinking of all the meaning that I'd drawn from people I know, people who knew I was there, in particularly the interviewee of this chapter at the back of the book. I actually did sit there that day thinking, what would Bob Gay say, right? And because of the situation I was in, none of that meaning made any difference. It was actually meaningless because I was just in a bad space that no matter how much meaning I could find, it was doing nothing for me that day. That's the effect of meaning.
Okay.
What do you think? Do you think meaning can expire?
Yeah, I think I
become meaningless?
I think yes, I do. In the context that meaning can also change. It's a bit like values. I think values can change through life experiences, people that you connect with, how you develop and grow and evolve.
I don't think they change. They evolve. It's a movement. Because a change is going from one thing clearly to another. Are you describing evolving?
No, I actually think you can literally, fundamentally change your values. I genuinely do believe that you can have momentous things happen in your life, or even an accumulation of micro things happen in your life, and it changes your values.
Yeah.
Which then changes a directional meaning in what you may be doing, or what you think, or what you surround yourself with. You know, if somebody, you know, removes themselves from a environment that isn't helping them, and then starts to build a new environment with different social circles, different things that they read, that can, I think, can change your core values, because you were in a meaningless position before. So
But what you're saying is about meaning becoming meaningless. So in that meaningless situation, your meaning's gone because it was meaningless.
yes.
I'm not attempting to be Ridley. I just want to clarify for the
I'm not
listener.
just saying very Ridley. But yes, I get that. And therefore, the knock-on effect to all of the other things around you then become meaningless, so they would change.
So you're also saying then, Debbie, because the context of all of this is leadership or leadershit,
Yep.
that a leadershit leader creates meaningless for a person who has meaning.
Potentially they could do, yeah.
They could, yeah.
We've seen people work with really poor leaders.
Yeah.
Or a good leader who has gone through something really difficult in their life that for whatever reason has morphed or evolved, and sometimes it is a period of time, it's not their overarching everything they do, but we've seen it affect people directly. They leave that business. You know, there's this quiet quitting that's been running over the past kind of 5 years or so, and I do think there is something around people will not stay around those environments when the leadership is demonstrated through meaningless behaviours and actions. And you list them out very specifically in this chapter as well, about just in regards to his style of meetings, impact of meeting, taking other people's work, you know, not supporting people, not dealing with situations. I think there's many ways that meaningless demonstrates that.
I also think meaning is like a set of signposts on a road, right? That are often missing. So you'll see teams and leadership groups make all this effort to come up with a perfect plan. And I'm not emphasizing perfect plan if you're listening, right? As in, imagine a couple of days working out what your plan for the next couple of years is. Maybe you've done the cliche, mission, vision, purpose. You've done the corporate stuff. You've talked about culture. And you're like, yeah, let's go away and get straight to work. And then the next time they have a meeting, nobody connects that whole piece of work to an operational conversation.
Yep.
And that's meaningless, right? Now, my analogy, and I'll come back to you, is I always remember, last cycling analogy for this episode, right? A piece of cycling that had meaning and meaningless in it. And it was the Tour de Mont Blanc race that went wrong for me, which I referenced in the back of the book, right? You moved it for me, which is great. Is that when I was in France or Switzerland, there were road markers. So you knew how long the hill was. That's meaningful, right? That's useful because you can get your head around it. You can prepare better. You can essentially, on an endurance ride like that, survive the bit you're on. But I'll never forget, I forget the name for a second, of the piece of road I did in Italy that was 12 kilometers, really steep gradients, lots of bends, and no road markers. And it went on for ages. And you had no idea when it was going to end, right? And I'll never forget the difference in feeling. Your strategy, your framework, your plan, your meaning has to be connected to what gets done. So people understand where they've progressed something.
Okay, so let's dig a little bit deeper, because I think meaning can have...
Do you like how I linked that back to the point?
That was very good.
Thank you very much.
But I think there's also a connotation around meaning having to be this massive thing, and also people knowing what their personal meaning is. I actually think it's easier to define meaning in a business context than it is on a very personal level.
Yep.
And one of the things that we talk about in the book is about meaning and being connected to values. So it seems that there's natural synergy there. It makes sense. You can connect the two together. The knock-on effect is understand your values, understand your behaviours.
And you actually, Debbie, you've put in the Go Deeper, look at the personal values workbook that's available and really think through. I am a believer, which is a Debbie phrase, right? In at least know one of your values and really think that right the way through.
We don't educate people on values.
I know.
So what I wanted to go to the point of initially is understanding that even if you're listening to this and you're going, I don't know what my meaning is, it's easier to start off is from a point of what is meaningless to you. So start off with the context of what is meaningless to me. So, and if you can define that around whether it be a specific task or a particular thing that you do, and again, let's put this into business, not personal at this moment in time. What are the meaningless things that currently happen in your business that you are leading? You're the leadership person. And actually, when you start writing that list, I think that'll allow people to start at a really good point of how they can navigate. It doesn't mean that the leader's shit. It means they're making some decisions that are not benefiting them or anybody around them.
Agreed.
Good. Thanks for that.
In America, they call it a period moment. We'll call it a full stop.
Yes. So in regards to meaning, and you do talk about it in the book, is that it can be very large. It could be somebody, being connected to an endurance race or, climbing every single mountain in the world or whatever. It has a connection to them. But it doesn't have to be large, does it?
No, that definitely doesn't, right? I find in my experience, and as I continue to learn about this, meaning is in a moment. Meaning is in a day. If you think about all the work in the world today to be about being present, being aware of more things, tuning into the things that you're surrounded by. We are very lucky sat here tonight on a Sunday, recording this podcast, looking out at a beautiful glen, right? But it's not about the beautiful glen. I saw a dragonfly today and I stopped what I was doing and I followed it, right? Because I noticed it, right? Meaning can be found just by being present. It doesn't have to always be this statement, but it's very personal. And what I find is people come up with meaningful things that they say they're about, and the longer they stick to that thing, it gets shorter and shorter and shorter, which is good.
What? Sorry, give me an example.
I used to talk about being a leadership paramedic and lots of really funny things that we would say to break the ice and to connect and network with people. Now I just say I'm an energist. Right? If you ask about that, great. If you don't, you've probably already experienced me enough to go, oh yeah. But on the inside, all the things that means to me still function, still happen. I don't need to tell you unless you ask. And if you don't ask, I'm okay with it.
So are you saying that once you understand your meaning is that it then becomes simpler and simpler?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, all right. So in business then, if I have a meaning, which you've highlighted already, is that, it could be a mission statement, it could be a purpose statement, it could be a
providing for your
statement.
family.
Yeah.
Right? It could be that you're in a strategic role, which is what you were just describing as an output, things that they have to have, right? But ultimately, that's just you, imagine it was hundreds of years ago and you had to go out and do like a battle in the glen. You'd put on your armour, right? You'd put on your tools ready to go and do that. That's what those things are. That's the things you're tooling yourself up with. That person could just be motivated by providing for their family. Providing moments, having fun, whatever those things are, that's still meaning in the workplace. The question I like to ask people is, do you know what matters most to the people that you lead? Do you really understand? Do you care enough? Because if you don't, you can't help them with their meaning.
And I have got to the point of, self-leadership, solopreneurs, people that are, there are more and more people that are working in smaller collectives, not just large corporates as well, but also finding that meaning and it not having to be, change the world. It is about just understanding what it is that your product or your service or whatever it is that you do is going back to, this is why I'm doing it. Meaning is about why, isn't it? You explain that quite clearly in the book.
And
if I don't know why I'm doing something, it then becomes meaningless.
And a good leadership practice, a good leadership thing to think about is to go looking for things that go well and notice them, speak about them, and add meaning in the moment. We regularly talk about soul food. I'm not actually talking about soul food at the moment, but if you see something that's good, say it. Notice it. Let the person know that you noticed it. You and I were very lucky to have some dinner together yesterday. It was very nice. First time we went for dinner for ages by ourselves. And I noticed the quality of the guitar playing on a speaker, right? Now, that's not necessarily a very deep spiritual moment, but the clarity of that sound took me somewhere. I noticed it. There are sounds all around us. I don't mean speakers and music, of people we love, people we care about, conversational tone, that if you connect with it, you can notice more meaning.
My brain is going right now thinking, if I was listening to this, where is this taking me? Where am I going? And it just brings me back that I think I have a natural need that I suddenly have to make everything quite academic or more intelligent or bigger than it is, where actually I'm now sat here kind of reassessing myself in the conversation going, well, surely the meaning is, it's actually much more nano, it is much more micro in any context. Doesn't matter whether it's a business, right? It's narrowed down to something that singularly everybody understands what it is and how it affects them on a personal level.
Yep.
And I think we've got lost in that meaning has to be this wide searching macro thing that, is so big that nobody can connect to because they don't know how to influence it or support it. That was just a thought that went through my head. So some of the things that you talk about in the book about Meaningless, and you actually did an activity, and it was just one of the things that happened in our life at the time, and we were going through some change, and you actually went and worked somewhere.
I did, yeah.
And it completely made you think differently about meaning and meaningless.
But it was really good fun being undercover and actually not... My day job at this point was already determined. I was a business coach then anyway. But it was very interesting to spend that time watching repetition in play. And I'll never forget the camaraderie that was gifted to me for no reason.
So you worked in a steel fabrication place. It was a friend of a friend's. But in light of that,
yeah,
I just think it's a really great story.
Yeah, I know. But I'll never forget one of the questions that was asked from my time there. I mean, I did all kinds of things. I was building steel chutes for construction sites. Never done that before. And even though I'm not very mechanically minded, my brain is a processor. So I saw what was going on and thought, there is a much easier way of doing this and quicker. And I can do those kind of things fast. Ask me to build something that I can use in your house, no chance. Ask me to follow a process, I can do that. And it was my first real front-end manufacturing experience of somebody wanting to leave at 10 to 5. Finish at 5, trainers point into the door, and I naturally wanted to clear up and put the place right for the following day, and they didn't want to bother. They were done. And I came across these mindsets that were really interesting. But when I was asked, what would you change because of my business coaching experience by the owners, it was really interesting because I actually said the thing you should change the most is where they have their peace and where they have their sandwiches and what facilities you provide them.
So peace is a Scottish word for
the
food
lunch,
and
pat
lunch.
Yeah. Because it's a steel place, it was dirty. And it wasn't dirty as in nobody cared. It was no one had thought about the effect that had. If you want them to believe in better, you had to get them something they needed, which was a clean environment to eat
But there's also a difference in there, because one of the things you shared with me is understanding that actual meaning is so personal to somebody.
Totally.
So the quality of the work, of the repetition, for somebody held meaning.
Did.
Whereas for somebody else, that is complete. For me, that would be mind-numbingly meaningless.
Yeah.
And it's not disrespectful to that person. It's just, for me, the stimulus is not the same. But for that other person, they saw it as this element of, I get it right, it's in the right location, the hole's in the right place, I'm consistently doing the same thing. And I think that's the big thing
But they stacked out, they not only stacked the job they were doing, they stacked the moment they were in, and every hour they worked contributed to something they were doing later.
Yes.
The one thing I noticed in that environment, people appeared to be more in tune with time away from work. And you know when you talk about what do you do outside of your job, where do you spend hobby time, where do you go and discover other talents, they all seem to go off and do other things, which was interesting.
Yeah, because if you look at high level, they don't actually have that balance or that understanding and awareness. I just think there's learning everywhere in it, is, asking people, what's your meaning and why you do that. We've got our business and what that question is, what is your and, is all about meaning as well.
It is.
So
yeah.
It's in getting people to understand what it actually means to you as an individual, and not intelligentalizing. What's the word? Anyway, that word too.
Intellectualizing.
Have we just made a new one up?
No, I think that's what you were trying to say.
So one question that isn't in the book, but it's something I do want to ask you, is understanding the generational shifts, things that we are seeing, the research that's happening right now at the moment. If we look, at the different types of employees in business now than they were 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Do you think meaning is different now in the workplace than it has been in the past 20 years?
I've never thought about that till this second. I think I can only tell you my experience, Debbie, which is I think people today of all age groups just want to know how they're doing. That's meaning. Yeah. How am I doing? And I understand we have to have intergenerational groupings for looking at large scale data, right? And behavioral traits as large scale data. Outside of that though, meaning's meaning. The person either connects with it or they don't, right? And therefore I think it's letting somebody know how they're doing is the best thing you can do with meaning.
Okay. Thanks.
Pleasure.
So one of the things I wanted to ask you was, there were some questions here near the end of the chapter, and it's the questions that remain for you to explore for yourself, your teams and your business. And I just think these are really great questions. Now, I haven't, again, prepared you for any of this, but I would like to ask you these questions and see where your head takes you in the moment. So first question is, does meaning have to have a purpose?
Does meaning, and I'm going to repeat it back to you as I externalize my thoughts. Does meaning have to have a purpose? No, it doesn't, right? Because meaning can just be that moment that you're in, right? There doesn't need to be a purpose driving through that. The end, yeah.
Do we have to have meaning in the workplace?
I think you do. I think you absolutely do. And we've been listening to some books and we're excited about something coming up in next season that's coming up after our gathering. And it reaffirms entirely with and aligns with my belief system. Even a little bit is better than none.
Yes, I agree.
So yes, it's a definitive yes. If you don't have meaning in your workplace, you've got leadership going on.
Yeah, well, I also think there's an element of understanding my meaning in my role. For me, when I'm coaching somebody, I always, if I'm coaching a leader particularly, is that I ask that person, whatever it is they're communicating out or sharing, does the other person understand what it means to them in their individual role? It's really important, because then that's the meaning context.
Yeah.
All right, next question. Should our leaders have meaning for us to feel valued?
Yes, right? And it's a definitive yes. And if you are somebody who struggles with this, stop talking about people as being something you really value and start talking about you working on it. Because there's nothing worse than saying, I really value people, and then you're absolutely a shyster. And you don't do any of the things that go with saying those statements. You know, you can't say you care, then demonstrate that you don't. They don't align.
Okay. Is meaningless a necessity for us to find meaning?
Yes, because meaninglessness, right? Just made it worse to spell. Is the state you find yourself in when you start looking for meaning. So I think it creates the other. You know, somebody quoted me the other day when I said things about when you don't know what it is, you don't know. But you don't know something, right? It's really frustrating. You know, I've been going through that this year. There's things I don't know that I've been wrestling with, and I've been trying to work out the meaning in them myself, right? And with support of you and support of others. But it starts from a meaningless space in your head first because you just don't know. But you know there's something you need to know, but you haven't worked it out yet.
Okay, I've got another question. I just need to write it down because...
Yep.
Okay. And then, is money meaning or is it meaningless? Huge question.
No, I think... If you've ever heard of the phrase, it's just money, right? That's not just saying you don't care about money. It's not being frivolous with money. It's just money. It's recognizing that you've disassociated any meaning with the money. You know, you don't need to read many books to discover that successful people who are content in whatever form don't talk about money as one of those things that gives it to them. There's a whole load of stuff, Debbie, that you've read about and we've talked about before many times is about what is enough, right? There's even social science around this now, and there are even mathematical numbers of where enough thrives and where excess...
It's in the happiness report every year.
Yeah, and where excess is actually not good for you and is borderline toxic. And how many people do you read about all the time who've got multi-millions, even billions of money and aren't actually happy, right? So coming back to your question, money has a meaning, but if you give it meaning towards a goal or towards a project, towards an improvement, towards making a difference, that's better than giving money your meaning. You know, Ebenezer Scrooge story 1,000 times over.
So I suppose this is really interesting again. So go into smaller businesses. Actually, there's two contexts to this question. So if I'm a leader within a very, very large business, I'm not connected to the money. It's not my money.
No.
So does that lack meaning? And is it easier to fall into really bad traits, and bad, not the word, to traits that are not beneficial or hinder the business? So therefore, money becomes meaningless. And then the second part of that question, that's one question. The other question would then be is, because as an owner or a founder or a very small business, you are so close to the impact of money and the cash flow, does money have more meaning in a small business than it does in a large business?
I think the challenge with your question, both first and second, you can't answer with a universal response. There isn't a universal quantifier for this, right? There is only an example at a time, right? Now, can you be meaningless with money in a large corporate like you described? 100% you can, right? That's still a choice though. It's entirely still a choice. And that if you have a situation where maybe there's entitlement meaninglessness, right, in play in a large company, you've got to look at the side view and where the root of that is, because it would be nothing to do with the money. That behavior has got nothing to do with money, right? It just plays out as a result with money. Overspending on expenses, overspending, overclaiming, whatever it might be. The root behavior of that's not actually what they then do. It's where they're devalued somewhere else. So meaning is still in play, but in a different form.
But does that not play differently in a smaller business because you're so close to the cash flow and the impact it could have on, money is important. It, in the context of understanding it and how it flows through your business.
Yeah.
But does that mean that it becomes more meaningful in a smaller business?
Again, there's no
contextually.
universal quantifier for this. It's business by business, moment by moment, situation by situation. What you need here to answer that question in the right context is what do your balance sheets, your profit and loss accounts tell you about what money's doing in your business in either version, but ultimately in the smaller business you'll see it. But I think money in both arenas has to be a metric, not a meaning.
Yeah, okay, that makes more sense. All right, okay, so now looking at our definitions or examples of leadership or leadership along the lines of meaningful and meaningless. On page 185, don't know if you're there.
I am, yeah.
Just can you pick me two of each and then just talk me through your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think...
A demonstration of meaningfulness in leadership.
I think, first of all, know your why.
Yeah.
The reason why you're doing things, right? Now, if you start off with just a simple, the reason why I'm doing is, and it's not a purpose-led why, because that takes a long time to work out. But if you start giving a reason why, right, and you connect it to the mission, you connect it to your strategic framework or your plan, that's going to help a lot of people, right? And also be open if somebody has a better idea than you, right? The amount of times I work with people in my corporate days, they'd have a better idea than me, right? The only gift I could give them back is let's find out. Let's give it a shot. Right?
And we've got to be really cautious there that it could become meaningless if that other person takes the credit for work that you've done. Yeah,
100%.
Yeah.
You go back into a different chapter. Your leadership's going to expire if you take that move.
Yeah.
But I think knowing your why. The alternative is giving orders and instructions without meaning, and you can read the page yourself. But it's more about you haven't communicated, right? You're just saying do it, just do it. Another one is if you want to put more meaning into, it doesn't matter what size of company you are, is find a cause that you care about and contribute to it. That's a really good bit of meaningful leadership. There are all sorts of things you can do. You introduced me to a really cool company in London last week called Earned.
EARNT, if anybody's listening.
And we'll tag them too.
Yeah.
I really love how they're thinking laterally about how to put meaning into situations that benefit, 3 or more groups of people. And that's not what they say on their website or even what they explain. That's a Dave interpretation. But I loved it, right? But whether it's something like that or whether it's just as direct as you partner with a charity, doesn't matter. It's just putting something in that you can build experiences with will drive meaning in your company.
Okay. So let's look at leadership and how actually it is seen in businesses. So one of the things that you talk about here is continue to use processes that don't work and then don't listen or not allow yourself to be challenged.
Yeah. So I think that one of the things that happens there is we make technology decisions in businesses and we forget to check why.
Yeah. I'm a sucker for that.
It's so easy to do.
I get it.
And yesterday we were in the botanical gardens in Edinburgh. Do you remember seeing that wee fat magpie sat in the corner hiding in the trees? He's clearly found lots of good things that day, or she, and they're sitting there chilling, right? That's really bad tech right there, right? But the other thing people do with leadership is not just the reason why they're doing things. They'll also dismiss it and will go through functional meetings. They'll have meetings to have meetings. It still astounds me to this day that 1 or 2 people are driving a meeting and people are willingly passive in that meeting and not grabbing a hold of that time and saying, we're all here, let's make the most of this.
But that then means that they don't understand their role or their meaning in that meeting. It just becomes cursory.
Yep.
So don't have the meeting, which you actually do talk about. There is an element in business. There are so many meaningless meetings.
Yep.
Anyway, I think you could talk about this for a long time. So knowing the question, meaningful or meaningless, and we need to understand and define through meaningfulness.
Well, before you say that, let me explain one more personal training thing, right? So, and again, if you're listening, I am not an elite athlete, right? You'll meet me. I've always got work to do, right? I eat too much. I love food, and I train so I can do those things. Otherwise, the amount I train, I should probably be in amazing shape. But I'm working on it, right? But there are days when I do train or ride my bike, and I ain't at the office in my head, right? And I make a decision, Debbie, in that single moment, that this ride is going to be a future benefit ride, and I'm going to suck it up and get through it. So the meaning I apply to that difficult experience, right? I'm not ill. My motivation's not there. I don't feel quite right. But I know that if I still do it, that little bit of meaning is there'll come a time in a couple of rides time when I'll be out riding and I'll feel on top of the world.
But that for me is you understanding why you're doing something. That's the
correct.
meaning. So it's, there are a
few years ago though, Debbie, I might not have bothered. I might have followed the information trail in my head and gone, I'll just ride tomorrow. I might have stopped. But nowadays, I don't know whether it's as you get older, you just realize you've got to stay on it, right? That I want to make that moment count, even though it's not counting in the exact moment in the way I hoped it did. But I know that when I do that, like you said, it's still contributing to something later. I can cash that chip in another moment, another time.
Great. So just knowing that we're now wrapping up, you just suddenly went really quiet then and just stopped talking.
I followed your pause.
Oh, right, okay.
Great.
So now let's finish on meaningful and meaningless, knowing that it directs you to areas that you can do and make really instant impact as well.
I think, Debbie, that's a really great tip from this whole episode, is that I remember countless people I've helped with career management. And you ask them, what do you want to do? Who do you want to work for, right? And they don't know. And then you say, okay, who don't you want to work for? And what can those working conditions never be like? People have a list.
Yeah.
Meaningless is the same.
Yeah.
If you've been listening to this conversation, please remember just one thing. A little bit of meaning in the workplace. A little bit of meaning in your team. A little bit of meaning in your day. We now know more than any other times in the history of self-discovery, self-help and neuroscience, it helps everybody feel better. If you can do a little bit, somebody else will do a little bit. This has been NDD. I've been Dave Evans.
And I'm Debbie Halls-Evans.
See you next time.
Thank you for tuning in to NDD. For ongoing inspiration, follow us at ann.scott on Instagram and online. Keep going, keep inspiring. Until our next episode.